Hakari versus Yuta, a topic that is almost just as controversial as the Gojo versus Sukuna debate. Even now that the fight is over between them, you bring up an opinion you had over the fight, and no matter what you say, there will always be disagreements. It's that contentious. Not only is there good evidence for both sides, which makes it that controversial, but the fans in the Jujutsu Kaisen community are very dedicated. Definitely one of the most dedicated fan base in the anime manga community. So there will be biases on top of the evidence, which only makes talking about these controversial topics even spicier. The topic in this video will, without a doubt, make my comment section an all-out war area. Nonetheless, we'll be going over all of the evidence and arguments for both sides and try to get close to the truth of, is Hakari stronger than Yuta? Now, I'll explain how we're going to format this video. First of all, I'm going to present all of the evidence that I'm aware of from both sides and break them down. When I do that though, obviously there's going to be evidence that conflict with each other. So the second part, I'll do my best to resolve that conflict in a way that is fair and satisfactory to what the author is trying to convey. And last of all, I'll be going over Yuta and Hakari's strength and weakness, given a game plan for both of them. That's all for the format. Now let's dive into the first section of this video. The character I'll be starting with is Hakari. The first piece of evidence for Hakari over Yuta is pretty simple. In chapter 146, Yuta says Hakari is stronger than him when he's worked up. Now there is a debate on if this statement is even valid in the first place, which we'll go over later, but for now we'll take it as true. So if this statement is true, this means that Hakari in Jackpot is stronger than Yuta, which means that Yuta is generally stronger than Hakari, but not when he's in Jackpot. This is a generally accepted interpretation to the statement. The second piece of evidence is used in conjunction with the first one to further support Hakari being above Yuta. This one is pretty recent too. It's the statement from Urame, which talks about Hakari's healing. Urame says Hakari has surpassed both Gojo and Sukuna in healing, but only that, meaning that's the only attribute Hakari has above them. People love this statement for Hakari because it's a feat no one else in the series has achieved. When you really think about it, his healing is insane. So insane that it's above the two strongest characters in the verse. He's the elite of the elite when it comes to healing. Now, something that I noticed while making this video is I thought there was going to be way more evidence, but there's actually not that much, which makes this topic even crazier because there's really only two pieces of evidence that have hundreds and hundreds of arguments attached to them. Now mind you, I'm just presenting the evidence right now. Soon we'll resolve the arguments and go into win cons, so bear with me. The other evidence for Hakari being above Yuta is basically the same. It's just all based on Yuta's statement. There is a weekly Shonen Jump promotion that just says what Yuta said, and there's also a popularity contest statement that once again just says when he's on a roll he's stronger than Yuta. Another one is once again following the same Yuta statement, but people use Megami affirming it with Yuji as support for it. That's pretty much it for the Hakari evidence. It's really not much, but it's enough. Now we'll look at what Yuta has in his favor when it comes down to evidence. The first piece of evidence, which is the one people argue the most over, is the second only to Gojo statement. Now there are two translations to this. One is in unusual abilities, which is the Viz translation. The other one is a TCB translation, which just says he is second only to Gojo, a prodigy. The TCB translation makes it clear that it's in reference to strength / overall power, but the Viz translation is much weaker in comparison, and it can easily get compromised by skepticism. We'll address these arguments after this part of the video and try to clear it up. The second piece is the heavy hitter statement. So far for Yuta, I've shown both TCB and Viz. Before anyone tries to say I'm biased or something for not showing other translations for Hakari, the reason why I didn't is because TCB didn't translate any of the statements I showcased for Hakari, but now with these Yuta statements, there are different translations. So I'm going to show them. I'm also only using TCB and Viz. Any other translation, I just don't care about. In the Viz translation, Kejaku says the rest of Jujutsu High's main fighting force, including Okotsu, will be busy with you today, emphasizing Yuta as the leader, which may imply him being the stronger one of the three. Once again, TCB makes this easier to interpret as in Yuta being the stronger of the three, saying the heavy hitters led by Okotsu. This statement plausibly suggests that Yuta is the strongest of the three, but they're in the same range regardless. Another one is the insurance statement. Here is the Viz translation. Maki is talking to Yuta and says, "Don't forget your role. If you die, we lose all our insurance," which is basically saying he's the strongest out of the heavy hitters. But the TCB translation tones it down. The TCB just says, "Yuta, if you go down, then there goes a good chunk of our insurance." This statement is pretty important in this debate because if we take the Viz one to be valid, then it heavily leans to Yuta's side. But it doesn't seem consistent regardless of who you think is stronger. We'll cover that more in this upcoming section. Similar to Hakari, Yuta also has a promotional statement which just says he is the second most powerful modern Jujutsu sorcerer after Gojo Satoru. And that is all when it comes to relevant evidence for each side. Now we're going to resolve the evidence because there is clear conflict when you look at Yuta's side and Hakari's side. Yuta's being pushed as the second strongest, yet Hakari is supposedly stronger than Yuta. So how is Yuta the second strongest? The next part of this video will be to try and resolve this confusion. The main issue comes with these two statements. Yuta being the second strongest and Yuta saying Hakari is stronger than him. I'm gonna try and resolve this as best as I can, but before I do, I just want to encourage anyone watching this video to drop a comment on their opinion and their reasoning on this topic, because I might miss things and I want people to be able to watch this video and be presented with everything that's relevant so they can choose what's more convincing to them. So if I missed anything or you just want to add to the conversation, I encourage it, and I'm always open to hearing what you guys have to say. Now back on track to resolving the issue with the two statements. The first argument I'm going to present is simply that Yuta's statement is not accurate. The reason being is because we have an author's statement saying he's the second strongest. And at face value, this doesn't seem to contradict the common interpretation of Yuta's statement, which is when Hakari is on a roll, he's stronger, meaning that it is only when Hakari has hit jackpot in a row. But this doesn't make much sense to me, because it's just a longer time Hakari is unkillable. He doesn't get a stat increase. Now, even if you say that means he'd win in a fight because Yuta would run out of CE faster or get fatigued, that doesn't mean Hakari is stronger than Yuta. He would just have a stamina advantage. But it's not that he's more potent than Yuta. Even though I'm disagreeing with this, I think it's still a valid win con for Hakari, which we'll cover more later, but keep in mind, you do not have to be stronger than someone to win against them. So another reason to dismiss the Yuta statement is because the author's statement just takes precedence over a character statement. It's also not like Yuta's statement has some certainty behind it. Maki interjects and says it's not true. Even though I don't usually like dismissing character statements because obviously the author uses the characters to convey important information to the readers, but you still have to evaluate the context of the statement. And in this case, we have good reason to dismiss it. Not only do we have Maki denying the statement, we also have the author's statements of Yuta being the second strongest. Meanwhile, all of the Hakari statements are built upon Yuta's statement, which if we invalidate them, then we know we can't use that as evidence because the foundation is faulty. Now that we've covered that, we still have to go over if Yuta's statement is even talking about strength, because at least the promotional post is talking about strength, the TCB translation is talking about strength, but Viz came up with one of, if not the most weirdest translation possible, unusual abilities. Now let me just say that it just sounds goofy. This translation is cooked. People do take this pretty literally and just say that Yuta has the weirdest ability, which I have to completely disagree with. It's just such a blank statement. If it were to mean that, like, okay, Yuta has the weirdest ability, so what? It doesn't add anything at all to the story. It's even weirder when you look at the promotion and the TCB translation, which both talk about strength. Even though this translation is weird, I do think it's most likely referring to strength just because this is a shonen manga. And the other translations and promotions support this idea, so it's just more in favor for it to be in strength than a blanket statement like, oh, he has the weirdest ability. Like, it would just be a goofy, irrelevant thing to state. So if we get that statement through, meaning that it is talking about in strength, then all of the evidence for Yuta is just more likely. So the insurance statement and the heavy hitters one, they would all be strengthened and would just pile onto this idea of Yuta being stronger than Hakari. And here's where we have to transition to the last and third part of this video, analyzing the fight / win cons, because Yuta fans might be extremely happy with how I've assessed the evidence, but just because you are stronger than someone, that does not mean you automatically win the fight. So we'll be taking a closer look at the matchup and see if Hakari can win against Yuta. I'm pretty convinced that the series does suggest Yuta is stronger than Hakari, but not by much. He just has an edge over Hakari. I think statements such as the one where Gojo says to not help unless he's weaker than Yuta or Hakari, which by the way puts a gap between them and Maki, but also shows how Yuta and Hakari are both sufficient enough to replace Gojo in the fight. Since it's an or statement, that means both Yuta and Hakari are basically on par, since if one of them was much stronger than the other, they would have been favored to help Gojo first rather than either of them. With that being said, we can all agree, at least, even if you disagree with me, that Yuta has the edge over Hakari. They are on the same caliber. So since there's not much difference in strength, we'll take a look at how their abilities match up and what would be their ideal game plan. For Yuta, his biggest concern is going to be if Hakari hits jackpot in a row. Mind you, Yuta is already on par with Hakari while he's on jackpot. So this means in base to base, Hakari is going to be significantly weaker than Yuta. This leaves a weakness that Yuta can very easily exploit. Now Hakari does does have a very fast domain expansion since he can use the 0.2, but even if he can get his domain off, he doesn't get jackpot instantly. He's still vulnerable. This is Yuta's best chance to kill Hakari. Him and Rika could easily take care of Hakari. He could just spawn Rika on Hakari, hold him still, and kill Hakari, like he did with Yuji. Yuta's summon in Rika is pretty effective too. We've seen him do it with Yuji, who I just mentioned, and Sukuna now in the recent chapters. So if he does that and grabs a hold of Hakari, it's pretty likely Hakari ain't surviving, especially with Yuta being so effective with his speed, shown both with Kenjaku and Geto. So it's very realistic for him to finish Hakari off in that way. Just grabbing him quickly, restricting him from using domain, and slicing his head off. Which, funny enough, Hajime did the same sort of thing by blowing Hakari's arm off so he wouldn't do his domain, since your best chance at Hakari is just making sure he doesn't hit jackpot. So this is definitely something Yuta would do since he has knowledge over Hakari's jackpot. Now let's say Hakari is able to hit jackpot. Even here, this means they are on par, as we established before. Yuta, like Hajime, would be able to easily survive the 4 minutes and 11 seconds. And when it comes down to the time of their abilities, Yuta's connection to Rika lasts 5 minutes. Almost a minute longer than Hakari's. So if Hakari doesn't hit another jackpot, then he's probably going to get cooked in a similar way that I was describing earlier. Now here's where Hakari gets the advantage. Hakari's ideal game plan would be to hit 2 jackpots in a row. If he does this, he can gas Yuta out because it'd be a stamina game. Not only that, but Hakari can afford to be riskier since he can just almost insta-heal. Like stated, he's unkillable. So I think it's very dangerous for Yuta if Hakari gets those 8 minutes of just unlimited CE with OP RCT and just pure stand and pound. I think Hakari can win against Yuta if he hits 2 jackpots in a row, but it would be because of stamina, not because of strength. Yuta against Ryo is pretty gassed out after using RCT and Rika, so this is a pretty realistic expectation if Hakari gets 2 jackpots. So to kind of sum everything up and wrap up this video, I think Yuta is stronger than Hakari. I think there is room to say Jackpot Hakari is stronger. I don't think that's unreasonable. I just don't see it as convincing or likely. Now, can he beat up Yuta in a fight? Yes, I think that is completely possible. I think he beats Yuta if he gets 2 jackpots in a row. But if he doesn't, I think it's almost a one-sided fight in Yuta's favor. Now, I know this is going to be a war in my comment section. I just asked for you guys to just present more information to the topic, add anything that you think is relevant to the topic, and let's just try to make this a place with the most information about this topic. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like and subscribe. If you have any suggestions, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next one.